Hey guys, welcome to Tribe Talk. We've got some special guests. I'm here with my co-host, Mike. Say hi, Mike.
Hi guys, how's it going?
And we have the Lemur boys, Justin and Corbin and Garrison. We're very excited to have them. Take it away, Mike.
Yeah, I'm super excited about today. I just want to ahead of time just say that this is a moment that I'm really excited about with these three guys. I've gotten to know them very closely in the last 3-4 years, something like that. And I have the utmost respect for Lemur and for his kids, and for his wife. And their hearts are chasing after Jesus as much as they can all the time. And really what we want to do is we want to talk about, with all that being said today, that there are times when we go through some very rough spots as family, and sometimes parents don't know what to do and how to handle situations. And so I think this is going to be really, really awesome today.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man.
So how's it going, guys?
We're good.
Nice.
Glad to have my boys home for Christmas and the holiday break.
Oh, yeah. Good to be home. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so just for clarification, I called them the Lemur boys. It's Justin and Allison LeMire.
Yeah. Wait a minute, that's his name?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I had no idea.
Yeah. Have 3 kids, right?
Yep.
Lemur?
Yep.
Why don't you tell us about your family?
Yeah, so married to my beautiful bride for 28 years. We're going on 29 this year. And have 3 kids. Elise is about 23 and lives up in Huntsville, Alabama. And then the boys, Corbin and Garrison, are 19, and they are at Texas A&M University. So proud of them and what they're accomplishing, and we're happy to be the kind of empty nesters now.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we also have Garrison and Corbin with us today too. So it's 2 boys
in the room.
Yeah, they're in the room with us right now. So awesome. So Lemur, just give us a little bit of a, and I'm going to keep calling you Lemur because that's the only way I know
that's
you.
who he is.
Yeah, that's who he is. If you could just give us a little idea of, your dad was in the military, correct?
Yeah.
And if you could just tell us, did that drive you into doing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad, Joe LeMire, call sign Iceman, believe it or not, long before Top Gun.
They stole it.
Yeah, they did. No,
he was in the Air Force.
Yeah, Air Force. He was F4 pilot. Flew actually OV-10s, OA-37s, O2, put the push me pull you, they call it. So from a very early age, I mean, aviation was just a thing for me, right? My granddad, B-17 pilot, C-46 pilot, so this is like the family tradition for us, right? My sister was in the military. I got uncles in the military. So I knew this was going to be the family business. A lot of people grow up and, I'm going to take over the farm or I'm going to do whatever. I knew I was going to go in the military. I never wavered from that. You can look at my senior yearbook. People drew F-16 little airplanes in my yearbook, and that's what I was going to go do. Went off to college, studied, was supposed to be an engineer. Didn't work out well. Went to marketing because I like to talk. But went to Angelo State University, 4-year ROTC, and then commissioned in 1995. Came actually here to the Eglin area. I was stashed as a lieutenant and then went on to Pensacola for Navy flight school, joint program, to be a Wizzo backseater. I was a navigator first. And then from that, career-wise, ultimately spent 24 years in the Air Force, a little over 24 years. Assignment-wise and whatnot, we were finished up flight school. I chose reconnaissance aircraft. I flew the Looking Glass, EC-135, so an old airborne command post. Did that until they retired them in 98. Went over and flew on the Open Skies and the Constant Phoenix program, WC-135, OC-135. Went down to teach at the Nav School in San Antonio. That's when they combined the career fields to make a CISO, they call it Combat Systems Officer. So I was one of the first guys there to help with the curriculum. It allowed me to transition, become a Wizzo, and then I transitioned to the B-1 Bomber, which is where I stayed for the rest of my career after staff assignments overseas, both in Europe and in Asia. But flying the bomber, dropping bombs was it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All over.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So thanks for that. Tell me, what was it like raising kids in a military family?
Yeah, I have. Because I'm a military brat myself. That's the only life I knew. So it was easy for me to probably bring that to my family. My wife did not grow up in a military family, although her dad did serve as a Marine Corps chaplain. But she was from West Texas. She didn't know anything really about this, and here I go, take her out of Texas, and we're moving all over the world. I knew how I was treated, and I came from a great family, how we moved from place to place. But I will tell you, I have a personal opinion, I guess. I haven't really done any research into it. But while military kids are resilient, because you're moving every 3 to 4 years, and they have to adapt, they have to change friend group, they have to change where they live, there's not really a permanent home per se. That also comes on its downside, right? They don't have those kids that they went from K through 12 through college with. So yes, they're resilient, they can adapt to situations, but are they missing something? Are they missing something from that homegrown, I grew up in the same town, same place, went to school with all these friends, and now these are my best friends all the way through college and life. So how do you blend that, and how do they find those relationships when you're moving every 4 years?
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it's also pretty tough. I would imagine constant deployments, Allison having to figure things out when you're gone.
Oh, boy, did she.
And then, you come home and you expect it to be the way it was before you left, and it's just not that simple. So how was that dynamic?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. We definitely, first and foremost, what I would tell you from a marriage standpoint is marry your best friend. Right, that's the first thing.
Pay attention, boys.
Yeah, because in the end of the day, life, deployment, military, kids, all of this, money, stress, life stress is going to get in the way. And I've always preached this. I was like, but at the end of the day, my wife is my best friend. I love spending guy time. I like going to the range. I like going to play golf. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, and we're just now embarking on that empty nester kind of life. And guess what? We love spending time with each other. So with that, you do this as a joint agreement. And so the deployments I went on, she got pregnant. I came back, she was 7 months pregnant. We rolled right to giving birth to the boys. They were born on 9/11 of 05. So, we had a 4-year-old. Elise was 4 at the time. And I was only home for 6 months. And then I left. And she was home with a 4-year-old and 6-month-old brand new twins. And, it takes a village. It takes those people in the squadron and the community, which Abilene, Texas was an amazing community for us at that time, with friends and church group, men's group, our marriage group. All of those things come into play on how do you survive. And I will tell you, on that deployment where she had the newborn twins, she left for a couple days, came back, and our air conditioning's hot in Texas, right? Air conditioning's up in the attic. All the drain line clogged up, dumped however many gallons of water in our ceiling. She came home to $10,000 worth of damage to our walls and our ceiling. And I called her, and my squadron commander, I was deployed to Diego Garcia at the time in the Indian Ocean, and he said, I can send you home, Lemur, but you gotta be back in 2 weeks. And I called my wife, and she was like, don't do that to our daughter. Because our daughter, being 4, knew now daddy was gone. She kept on asking, how many more naps? How many more naps till daddy comes home? And so Allison, that's what we ask of our spouses and our family. And Allison just took that and had to deal with it, had to deal with the AC company, had to deal with the insurance, all that.
Plus, she probably would have loved to have seen you for 2 weeks and was mature enough to handle the immediate departure that she knew your daughter couldn't handle. That's pretty
correct at
pretty
the
cool.
time. Yeah, so that was a big one for us.
So boys, you ended up in Niceville. This is where you boys graduated high school, right?
Yes, sir.
So, and you've heard everything your dad said. Corbin, what do you think? What was it like growing up in a military home?
Yeah, I think, as he kind of said, I think just 3 words that immediately came to my mind was just busy, fun, but also just stressful. I think growing up, kind of like we mentioned before, I mean, a lot of moving around, a lot of adjusting and adapting to new environments, new people. So, that brought on its own challenges, but I think today it's definitely made us who we are.
That's good.
Yeah, I'd say similar things. I think moving around is a blessing and a curse. We became very resilient. Growing up in a military house, you're very disciplined. A lot of those characteristics carry over, and making our beds was mandatory, that kind of thing.
Love it.
And that definitely carried over into high school, and I think served us very well. I would also say when you are in those kinds of small communities, the B1 community is very small, and that camaraderie is very, very strong. And you spend a lot of time with the other families because you're going through the same thing. And we are still very close with many of those people. A lot of them ended up here, which was awesome. But you grow up seeing that, and you can't help but crave it. My dad was talking about how that's the family business, and it's the family business because we know nothing else, and we don't really, quite frankly, want to know anything else. That kind of life is hard, but it's really good. And you're surrounded by good people, like-minded people. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I agree. It's funny that you touched on that. Looking over the questions, the first thing that came to mind was probably the greatest thing we took away from that was finding yourself a strong wife. I mean, my mother is a godsend,
Amen.
Whenever he's talking about, it's hard not to cry, you know what I mean? Because she sacrificed a lot for us growing up, and I never heard her complain. And we went through some hard times, and she never faltered, never wavered. She knew the life she chose, and she stuck with it. There was never ever a time that she didn't have a smile on her face when Dad was gone, and that was probably the only thing that held us together at that time in some parts. So
Yeah, your mom is an amazing human being.
Yeah, Mike and I tell your dad all the time that's one thing we have in common with him is we all married up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we did. Yep.
So good job, Lemur.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's awesome. Okay, so both you guys, what are some areas of study where are you at now, I guess? Let's start there.
yeah, so at Texas A&M, graduated, and never thought really we'd end up at the same college, but we did. We're in
Never
it
would have
together.
guessed it.
Corbin shaking his head.
Never would have guessed it.
Can't tell yet if Corbin's happy about it or not. But no, I'm just kidding. But it's been awesome. And so I'm studying psychology, which is an area that I've always been super interested in. For the longest time, I loved math, thought it'd be engineering. And within the last 2 years, junior, senior year, I took a dive into psychology and never looked back. And I've loved it. Thoroughly enjoying college, thoroughly enjoying the classes that I'm taking, what I'm learning, the professors that I've had.
Good.
Absolute blessing so far. So
Good.
no
What about you, big
complaints.
guy?
Yeah, so I'm studying hospitality and tourism management. Not entirely sure what the future looks like. Hopefully a lot of travel and bringing back in the photography side of things for myself. But yeah, no, college is great right now. Yeah, I'm going to emphasize that again, that I never would have expected to be at a college with my brother, my twin. But yeah, it's definitely a blessing for sure now.
It's a blessing for us because we were like, yes, while we would handle the split college thing like many people do, I was like, you just made our lives so much easier.
Oh, yeah.
And that comes with benefits like their sweet apartment. So,
Hey, but I just want to add, you mentioned photography. If there is a good picture on the Gento Tribe website, it was taken by Corbin.
That's a great
everybody
point.
knows, yeah.
It's funny that you bring that up because just before the podcast, you and I were just kind of sitting here talking, and we were talking about some of the pictures. I'm like, man, that one picture of us all together.
They're all his.
Yeah, that's I forgot about that. That's great.
We lost our media coordinator when they went to school.
Yes, dang it.
So.
We'll bring him back from Texas A&M.
That's right.
Okay, so Garrison, I'll move back over to you. You were known in high school for having a pretty strong faith, and I got to be part of that early on a couple years back, and you're very dedicated to Jesus, and in fact, I think you actually have a nickname that you go by, which is Pastor Jer. Is that right?
Yeah.
Pastor Gary.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
Pastor
I'm from the
Gary.
lacrosse team.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, can you just tell us briefly about some of that history? What about your relationship with Jesus?
Absolutely. So it started in FCA. We started in FCA when we were in 8th grade with Miss Morello, and then her husband ended up being our principal at Niceville, so that was pretty cool. But we stuck with FCA, ended up being led by actually another B1 family of ours, and so it was super exciting, and I was all in. It wasn't just a resume builder for me. I think that FCA can become that very quickly, and it's very easy to teeter that line, and it does look good on a resume, but I thoroughly enjoyed every second, so I was pouring into that. went through a hard time, lost the faith for a little bit, I would say. I think I took a dip, came to Gento, met you guys, and kind of hit the bounce back, and that was really sophomore year. So going into junior year is when I was going to use FCA as an outlet to start spreading and start moving the word. And so I got some really awesome opportunities to be co-captain junior year with a really awesome captain, Jules Pace, who her father's also in Gento. And so again, you look back and you see God lining things up for you. And so Jules gave me that outlet for sure. And so she let me speak. And in senior year as well, same thing, is then I was captain as well, but I was speaking, and it just so happened that some of the lacrosse guys had come to FCA that day, and so they got to hear my kind of sermon for that day, and that's where the nickname came from.
Is that when you started growing your beard and your hair?
That was the idea. I was like, I've gotta look the part.
It's awesome.
It's working, by the way.
No, but it was great. The hair was already coming in thanks to Corbin, and the beard followed because I was tired of shaving. So it just worked out like that. But through the lacrosse team and whatnot, I don't think it was ever me evangelizing. And we had talked about that, and I love something that Keith Pace always says. He used to always say, God is just way more creative than that. You do not have to shove Bible knowledge and your faith down everybody's throat. It does not have to be like that. If you just build relationships, and that was a big thing coming from the military. That was kind of the motto coming out of retirement.
It is actually, and I'll let him continue on, but like when we retired, my wife and I were trying to figure out like what sums up our career and all that. And so my coin, for those of you not in the military, we collect round metal objects, RMOs they're called, and so they're little coins that are handed out to you by special people or commanders and whatnot. And so you collect them, and so I have tons of them. So we had a board made, and my retirement gift was a wooden board that would hold all my coins that are actually displayed in our house, and it was a picture of a compass on there. And it said, and the slogan says, "Serving across the globe, one relationship at a time." And if there's anything I could impart to people, it's about life is about relationship. Jesus wants you to have relationship, not only with Him, but fellowship and koinonia with fellow believers. And so I think that plays a factor into.
Yeah,
that's good.
And so I think we'll get into that a little bit later as well. Really, how that really ended up playing into later on, but that was the goal. Is I was like, I don't have to make you believe, but I'm just gonna love what Keith Pace says. Again, it's all the Keith Pace goes, but he's got some good one-liners.
Let's just call
he is wise.
Let's just call him Uncle Keith.
Yeah, Uncle Keith.
Yeah.
But it was like love the hell out of people, and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah. I'm gonna build relationships with everybody that I can, and hopefully they will just come to that, and that opens the door for questions when people become comfortable around you. And that's really all I did. I don't think it's anything hard. It's nothing that any of us aren't capable of.
It's a very authentic approach.
Yeah.
You just build relationships with people and just love them for who they are. That's all anybody wants, especially in high school, and there's not enough of it going around. So if you can do that effectively, immediately I find that you stick out, essentially, because that's not normal anymore.
That's good.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Corbin, there was a point in high school you had a lot of questions about your faith, and tell us a little bit about what happened there and how that manifested. What was the catalyst?
Yes, we grew up in a house, always going to church on Sunday mornings, always involved with some sort of youth group wherever we were, everywhere we were. I think kind of coming into high school, I definitely just lost sight of my faith pretty heavy, and I definitely turned my attention to things I definitely shouldn't have to find that fulfillment. And throughout that break is kind of where coming back to the faith is really where there's a lot of questions. When you step away from the faith, your mind's not working that way. You're not looking for that sort of thing with God. Coming back to it, some of the things you hear, you're kind of like, You know what I mean? You kind of question things, and I think that's really what
God gave you that critical mind.
We'll see. But no, I think that's what was hard. Is it was hard for me to get back in the routine of things when I kind of finally started to finally get my faith back a little bit. It definitely made me question some things. And
so Garrison mentioned a dip in his faith too. Did this happen kind of at the same time? Were you guys struggling with this at the same time?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Okay. I ask because I think it's natural as a teenager to question everything.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's kind of built in us. I like that God allows us to do that because he wants you to wrestle with him and with it. And I'm just curious if that was kind of the phase you two went through, and did it happen at the same time or together? Or?
I think, and I'll see if you agree with this, but I think Corbin's was a slower drop off. I think coming into college, I won't speak for him, but that it was somewhat of a gradual decline. I had a couple catalyst events that then made me question my faith instantaneously. So it was a much quicker drop, probably slightly more dramatic on my end of a drop. But so in a sense, they did coincide. At the same time, I think we were both questioning our faith. And so that was a really interesting time as well. I became somewhat of a hermit, kind of tucked myself away to figure things out. So,
Okay, go ahead.
No, go.
It's so that what I was going to ask you, and you do not have to share. Excuse me, I'm having a little bit of a frog here, Jim. But you don't. Yeah, you don't have to share this with us. But what were those catalysts or those catalyzing events that kind of got you questioning?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a buildup of a couple things, and so the first one was kind of some of the troubles that we went through with Corbin, with the secrecy somewhat behind it. And I think the biggest part of that was not what was going on, but it was the fact that most of my friends had known. I had no idea. It seemed like a big secret then that was somewhat kept from me, and for good reason. In a sense, you could technically chalk that up to being a good friend, right? They didn't want to, sell Corbin out. And so, and then also through that time, looking back, I had also gone through a bit of a breakup at that point as well. So I was like, this is just, everything's hitting me all at once, which now definitely spiritual warfare. And so I was down on my knees for a little bit, for a good time period, just with a bunch of those. And it wasn't necessarily anything that affected me horribly. It just made me question why that would happen to somebody who I felt like at that point, and I wasn't as strong in my faith, and I wouldn't even say that I was practicing on a daily thing. And so I thank God for that struggle, because that's what brought me really to becoming who I am today. But at that point, I wouldn't say I was praying daily or reading the Bible daily or journaling and really diving into what that was. So I just thought I was being a good Christian because of my works. Hey, I'm an FCA guy, and I'm good. Nice to people, and that was about it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But in your mind, it's no, I'm a good Christian. Like, why would this happen to a good Christian? And instead of questioning that might be the enemy, that the first notion was, yeah, God, why are you doing this to me? I've served you faithfully for however many years, and you're kind of screwing me right now. And so that's where I found myself when we all met, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Corbin, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened? Your brother kind of mentioned it, but what's the story?
So moving into high school is really where I was kind of taking a more independent route of my things. A few of the kids I was hanging out with, we were all getting involved heavily with vaping at the time. That progressed to smoking weed as well. And that really just grabbed a hold of me early in high school. Really got me hooked, a lot harder than I definitely thought it was. But I think that's right where kind of like I was dropping my faith slowly, and as I picked up vaping is where I was now finding fulfillment in an activity, if that makes sense. Instead of opening up a Bible, I was, smoking, doing whatever, hanging out with friends, so that's where that just progressed throughout high school, to be honest. That's really where I was at. I was just putting myself into smoking and hanging out with friends. That was my fulfillment. That's what I was getting back then, instead of much healthier alternatives. So yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Lemur.
Yeah, so just as their dad, and I want to encourage parents that may be listening to this. I think probably one of the things my wife and I dealt with was, okay, we were doing what we thought was right, how to raise our children in the church and the faith that I grew up in, and my wife, and we have a great relationship with our kids. What that doesn't mean that you're not gonna be, that your kids are going to do things that they're going to hide from me, or whatever. And Lord knows I did it with my own parents, even though I was raised in a very Christian home and loving family and whatnot. So I just want people to not be discouraged with the fact that, like, the hardest thing for us to have to deal with during this situation was, what did we do wrong? Mm-hmm. Number one rule in our household: integrity first. You do something, you own it. Right, that's exactly what my dad, preached to us, and it was like, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all sinners, right? One of my favorite quotes from a shirt my dad had for a long time had a bite of an apple out of it, and it said, "I'm not perfect, I'm just forgiven." Right? And so, and if you believe the word, right, then when somebody comes and asks you for forgiveness, then, and 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, God's faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So the bottom line is you're going to screw up. And all sin is sin. It doesn't matter whether you're vaping, you're out, having premarital sex, whatever. It's all sin to God. And so we really had to deal with, like, okay, what did we do? Like, how did we not teach him that you're not supposed to vape? You're not supposed to do drugs. We preach it. We talk about it all the time. But it's still, God gives everybody free will. Mm-hmm. And that free will can take different turns.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I want to touch on a couple things really quick. So I think it's important. Is number one, free will. Free will is a gift that was given to us as human beings. And you can't have a loving creator who, excuse me, I'm getting choked up over here, but you can't have a loving creator that is going to force you to love him. Mm-hmm. So, or to force you to do the right things. So the gift of free will is a gift because it's like, he gives us the opportunity to make our own choices, because if he doesn't allow us to make our own choices, then he basically is, you're nothing but a robot. And, and then, so if you become a robot, that's not love, right? So free will is an extremely important and powerful, it's a superpower that all of us have. And so it comes down to choice, and God's trying so hard to get us to understand how to be authentic and how to live our lives. And that's important. The second thing that I want to touch on is you talked about, Garrison talked about this idea of spiritual warfare. So, and Lemur, you brought up, parents that might be struggling, that are listening, that struggle with the same thing. It's so true that if we have free will, and if we have an enemy and we have a God, then all of those powers, those entities are working to get your attention, mm-hmm. right? And so it's interesting. Corbin's had issues struggling with his faith and questioning it. Same thing with Garrison. Well, we have to believe that there was probably an enemy involved in that process. And in that process, trying to get their attention off of what actually is best for them, so they can be authentically them. Right. And being authentically us is only found through our Creator, because He created us a certain way. And so that's part of the walk as a Christian, is we have to constantly look to find out. That's why we read the Bible. What does life actually supposed to look like? What is it supposed to look like? And the more we learn that Bible, and the more we pray to Him, the more we get engaged with Him, the more He can actually change us and get our attention.
Well, the cool part about that too is you can move on with your life without shame.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you can still reach your full potential even though you have a road bump.
That's exactly right.
So, I'm curious, Lemur, you mentioned, I love the advice that you gave parents that might be going through this because, man, that's the first thing I would do too is think about where I fell short as a parent.
Yeah.
So, how did you and Allison handle the situation?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say something too as a kid in this perspective, because I remember when we first went through this, I did with my parents. That's what hit me very hard too, is the fact that knowing that they think they did something wrong, and it's just not the case. You know, I made those decisions myself. It was all me. I made the decision to start what I was doing. I made the decision to have the friends around me that I did back then. That fell nothing short of how my parents raised me. It was quite the opposite, really. The complete opposite, a full 180 of what I had grown up to be in that part. And the things I was involved in was even a complete 180 from how I got there, you know? So, yeah, I think that's also goes for a lot of other, you know, maybe possible kids that are in my situation or were, is definitely not always a reflection on the parents, for sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
I love it. Yeah, that's awesome. And the boys may hear some stuff that, you know, we hadn't really gone down, but, you know, once it came to light, and you know, the light exposes the darkness, right? And so once it came to light, number one, I'm the strict disciplinarian in the household. My wife is extremely loving, and that's where we complement each other. In this instance, it would turn out to be almost a role reversal. I think my wife took it actually really hard because, you know, we prided ourselves on her. We having the luxury and the benefit of her being a stay-at-home mom while the kids were little. And so that's her wheelhouse, is the home and the children. And I think she took it a bit hard, you know, like again, the discussion about what did we do wrong or what did she do wrong? And it really wasn't. I was extremely calm, which I think probably frightened the kids a little bit because normally I'm not. But I will touch a little bit because, and we can go down on the road on the punishment thing and whatnot and what we chose to do. But it ultimately came to the point of you still have to have a relationship with your kids. Mm-hmm. And they have to have the freedom to still come and be able to crawl up in your lap, right? You don't love the act, you don't like the action or love the action, but you still love the person. It doesn't matter what they're doing, and that's love, right? I don't love Corbin any less than Garrison, right? That because he chose to dabble in things and Garrison did not, or at least did not. That's not it. I'm not going to support that action. Oh, and trust me, in the discussion in our household, we went down those roads because I was like, I'm not going to stop him from vaping. Like, I mean, they're teenagers, right? They have cars.
You mean you felt you couldn't?
Right.
Yeah.
You just feel like you what are you going to do? They got a car, they got a phone, they got money. You know, I mean, they can do what they want. They're going to figure out a way. And so then I even contemplated. I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go get vape from, you know, whatever local place, make sure it's at least FDA approved and whatever. If he's going to continue to do it, I want it to not be something he's just picking up from some other kid. And then I was like, no, what are you doing, Lemur? No, you're just aiding and abetting, right? You know, so I was like, we're not going to do that. But that literally was a discussion. Ultimately, if we want to, you know, we thought, you know what? We'll curb his whole attitude. We'll make him pay for the things that he uses to get these that we provide for him. At the time, he and Garrison were sharing their first car, right? So they were just over 16. And so they, you know, split evenly. And so my wife and I came up with a deal instead of me like just grounding him and all, which there was punishment like that to begin with, but you know, that was short lived. But what was the long-term thing? How are we going to get his attention to tell him like, this is not appropriate, right? We don't live this way. This is not what we're about. And so we came up with this thing where it was like, oh, we're going to develop this contract. We're going to tell him, okay, we're going to take our family cell phone bill. We're going to split it by 5. You got to pay because you have to pay if you're going to continue to do this by how you text your friends and get vapes or whatever. So I said, you pay that part of the cell phone bill. I said, you got to pay a car payment, half of the car payment between what we pay for the boy's car and car insurance. Because I was like, you can't go to wherever you got to go to get it over in other cities, or you can't use your phone or whatever. And if you're not going to stop, then you're going to pay for those things.
And Corbin, we thought, okay, this is because it came up to several $100s a month, right?
Close to what,
370 or something like that a month, and they were working. They were making money. And sure enough, Corbin, instead of, I thought it would just shock and all, right? And he'd be like, "Oh, I ain't doing this. I'm out." And all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, about the car payment, because if you're telling me part of my punishment is Garrison gets free reign, first dibs, whatever, for the car, then why should I have to pay for half the car payment?" My wife and I were like, that's actually really, that's a really good observation.
Got him with logic.
Yeah. So I was like, that's a really good observation. All right, so we cut the half of the car payment out, but he still had to pay for the cell phone bill and the car insurance and whatnot. And so we thought for sure he's not going to sign this. And we were like, hey, dude, pray about it. Think about it.
Yeah, you did an actual contract, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Like
He signed it.
legal document.
So we drew it up, and we were like, we're all going to sign this thing. And I say, and here was the thing is, if you sign that contract, we will not harass you about vaping, about whatever it is that you're doing. I was like, I still absolutely nothing illegal, even though that's technically illegal if you're underage, but whatever. I mean, no drugs, which we knocked that off right off the bat. But I was like, he was like, I'm going to choose to vape.
So what was your initial reaction, Corbin, when you heard the deal?
Gosh, to be honest, I can't even remember fully. It was interesting. I'm going to backtrack to when I first got caught.
Okay.
Or really, technically, I told my parents, but with the heavy encouragement of my two lovely siblings.
Nice.
There was a little bit of an ultimatum.
Hey, they got your back, buddy.
There was a, you're going to do it or we're going to do it.
We call that grace-filled accountability.
Yes, that's what that
That's
was.
true.
It was very shocking because really we didn't talk about it for a while. I mean, for months probably, because I can't tell you the exact timing, to be honest, but let's just say it was maybe around the halfway year mark of the school year, and this contract wasn't drawn up until almost the start of summer.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of there wasn't even, I don't think they ever told me you're going to sit in this house and stay in this house. But I think we were on the same wavelength of we're just not even going to go there. So it was kind of like I was grounded, but I really wasn't.
So you grounded yourself.
I kind of grounded myself. Yeah, I knew I was in the doghouse. But it was very interesting. I think whenever they brought that up, I'm going to just be honest. Unfortunately, through that whole process, I was still able to get my hands on stuff through school, etc. So for me and for their minds, they might think I was not addicted through that time frame of me not smoking, and I still was very much so. So when I heard this contract come up in my head, now I'm attacking this from the perspective of I'm still hooked on this drug. It's not behind me yet. It wasn't, I had 4 months to get it out of my system, find something else to cling to. It was, I'm still holding on to this, and now you're telling me I can do it. So that's kind of where, whenever I heard it, I immediately jumped on it, and I was like, you know what, no, I'm going to just do it. Because I was still hooked on it, and that's what was just overruling the logical thoughts in my head of, no, as a sophomore in high school, do not be taking on a payment. But I even told my parents, too, this is a long time after, but I even told my parents, too, it was like, that is literally probably the best punishment they could have ever given me. Overall. It taught me so much.
Yeah,
it taught me so much because... I don't know who else familiar, but vaping's not cheap. It's not cheap, and I was going through a lot. So on top of paying for the substances, I mean, I was also paying them, and that racks up quick. So, I mean, not only now did I learn how to pay my own way for a lot of things, but I also kind of learned how to keep an addiction through that whole process as well. So it really taught me a lot about just, I think it really just kind of made me grow up a little bit.
Yep, absolutely.
Very quickly, because I quickly switched out of a very kid mindset, and now I was kind of looking at something in a more real world way, if you will.
I think that's one of the struggles of parenthood too, is figuring out how much rope to give your kid. And so, LeMire, you had a leap into that.
Yeah. So, and I gotta jump back in here because the important pieces of this is the contract. All right, we thought we were gonna it was shock and awe, right? He's not gonna sign this thing, so we're just gonna make
this is definitely gonna work.
We're gonna make it so awful that he's gonna be like, heck no, I'm not doing that, and he's just gonna stop. And then he called our bluff. And he was like, all right, I've thought about it, prayed about it, I signed it. Here it is, like that. And me and Allison were like, what do you do now? Number one, you can't harass him. You said that. We did have a ground rule that said, not on my property. You don't do it on my property. I said, but we will not. We're not going to quibble about the fact that you will get up and walk out the door and you want to go walk down the street because you need a hit, or whatever. So for us, it was a lot of, you got to swallow a little bit. You're always like, hey, you really shouldn't be doing that. You know that, right? It's bad for you. It's bad for your health. There was no comments, right? You signed the contract. We signed the contract.
Hang on, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
I'll jump in here.
please.
The other thing to it that I think is worth noting is that my parents were smart enough to also realize that there was definitely going to be ways to get his hands on it if he didn't sign the contract and said, okay, I'm going to quit. Mm-hmm. And so the ultimatum was, if you don't sign the contract and now you're quitting and we catch you vaping, you will back pay us for every single month that you did not pay. So there was a secondary to that, because
you're right.
You can't just be like, or just sign this and quit, because every high schooler's going to be like, cool, I'm not going to sign it, and I'm still going to vape, and you're not going to
roll the dice.
Yeah.
No, and honestly, that's a good point, G. Yeah, so much happened, right? So, because the other thing is we said we will spare no expense, right? If you need cessation, you need gum, you need whatever, we will get you whatever you need. But again, if you tell us, yep, I'm ready to quit, I'm ready to go through this, but then like Garrison said, if he's caught by Garrison, his friend, somebody slips up and tells me, I was like, you have to go back and back pay us from the time that you... So there was still another stick at the end of that carrot, right? So, but we had to swallow that, and it went on. Did you want to add it? I would just say it went on for 18 months. It was a year and a half he did this, and every month it was just like a tithe. He had to come, he made money, he was working his jobs or whatever, and he had to come in. I was like, first of the month, I was like, you got to pay the piper, right? And he would write us a check, pay us cash. He paid us cash, actually, so we had quite the stack. It was nice. I always had cash around.
So I feel kind of responsible for this, don't you, Mike? A little bit?
A little bit.
So what you guys don't know is every week your dad would come to the shed and he would toil over this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
that's right.
It broke him at times to do the right thing. But he always knew that he was doing the right thing, which is kind of cool. And I don't want to speak for you, buddy, but probably good that you had that support system to be like, you got it, man. You got it.
No, I was going to get to that. I mean, this is where the tribe comes in, right? So, for us, even as men that you think, oh, I got it all together. Oh my goodness, the times in the shed and meeting with my tribe, this tribe, that advice from other men. Which ultimately, then, when the boys got involved with the Gento tribe on their own at the high school level, but being introduced and being part of this tribe, ultimately, which I'll wrap up at the end of this, is such a blessing, because there are other men that get to pour into your kids, other women, whatever. But in this case, it's a men's ministry, so I have no heartburn with the men that are here, and that they're believers, and what they the wisdom that they can bring to my boys is sometimes it's not as easy for them to come to me, but it's easier for them to go to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I think so many times men especially, and especially at least what I've seen in the soft community, special operations community quite a bit is that we have a tendency to try to fix everything on our own.
Right.
And when I'm having problems, guys are scared to death to allow themselves to be seen. Like we don't want anybody to see, man, I'm hurting here. I don't know what all the answers are. And that's not how we were created. We were actually created for relationship. And I remember back in those days, and I remember you sitting with us and just saying, man, this is what's going on, and what do I do? And it was a struggle. Mm-hmm. And I want to point that out. It's important that men have other men that they can go to and bring them in, and you need, if someone's bringing you into his circle, you also need to be man enough to protect that individual.
Correct.
So, and that's an extremely important thing.
I think the crazy thing is, a lot of times we would look at you and go, I have no idea what to tell you, but I love you.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't. And sometimes the answers aren't there, but it's support, and it's about being available. And one thing before it gets away is one of the things that also you said a little while ago was, you're trying to figure out how do we handle the problem. And one of the things you said was, we've got to be strict and handle it this way, but also there was so much love in your heart for your boys.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you used something along the lines of, I want them to still be able to crawl up in my lap.
Right.
And I think that's so important to understand too, because I am convinced of it. Love comes from our Creator. To understand what love is, it comes from Him. And we as humans, the Bible tells us that He loves us more than we even love our own children, our own wives, and all these things. And I just can't I don't know how to explain that.
Right.
Like I don't get that. And so the important thing of that for us to remember that we have a God who is our Father, who we can crawl into the lap of and ask for help and ask for guidance. And so I think those are the two important things. One, you have God the Father who we can crawl to and ask for guidance, and then also realize that you have to have good men around you to be with you and to support you as much as can.
Well, and the one example God gives us of that love is your family.
That's right.
And your network. And so obviously you had the support of your parents. It may not have felt like it at the time, but I heard your brother kind of became a warrior on your behalf. Garrison, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you approached this? I mean, this is your twin brother, man. You guys were pretty close, so.
Yeah. Coming into it, I knew I was going to catch a lot of crap for this because that's your brother.
Yeah.
And also growing up, I was the troublemaker. And we raised some crazy.
Trying to wrap my head around that one.
A million stories that I'm
it.
sure my mom would be just ecstatic to share.
That's podcast number 2.
Yeah, we're gonna have mom on here, and it's just you guys are gonna get filled in. But that's your brother, and we had pulled some heists together, and we didn't rat on each other. Because that's kind of what you do as guys and especially as brothers. And so that was a hard thing to come to grips with. And I called my sister actually, and I was like, look, I don't know what to do. Like, part of me wants to hug him and part of me wants to choke him out. Mm-hmm. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And so we had come to the decision where I was like, look, you're going to tell him where I am, because I'm not hiding this from mom and dad. I'm not. I was like, I love you, but I am not doing that for you. Mm. And it was, there was anger involved, but ultimately that was a place of love. I was like, right. There's something more for you than that. And so I did catch some crap for it, and I'll take it,
Not a little bit.
Yeah.
Not a little bit.
That was, I think that also
contributed
to the
You were seeing red, Corbin?
I was giving the red, I think, mostly. Yeah.
I think, and, also... we never really talked about it, but our friends knew. I mean, the people that we knew. I mean, I had caught him. That wasn't a secret. And mm-hmm. It wasn't a coincidence that then he was going to go tell mom and dad on his own. Yeah, no. That was, so I was, I don't want to say exiled, because that makes it sound like a lot worse than it probably was. But I also probably took some time to myself and cut myself off from a lot of people, and I had kind of just at that point was kind of done with the faith, and I was just not going to attack it from that perspective anymore. I had just fully given up the idea that there was somebody really looking out for me at that point, and so found Junto, got involved with our little breakfast club that first year.
So amazing.
The craziest group of like 5 or 6 of us that just would have never been friends. I mean,
and Jim made me do it, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm not sorry.
No, I'm not either.
Me neither.
No, but and so those guys, we were talking about the tribe. Those guys became my everything. I think Nathan and Christian and Patrick, those guys meant more to me than they will ever know, mm-hmm. because they were all, you guys were, that was it. That's all I had for like 6 mm-hmm. months, and I was just clinging just for dear life. That was, me and Christian had talked, and I'm pretty sure it was Christian, I can't remember, and we had pretty much said, dude, if this doesn't work out, like, that's it for us. We're good with the faith. Like, this is the last chance.
Gosh, I did not know that.
I mean, I was at a breaking point. I was done. And
Man.
and it worked, thank God. But I think out of that, it was then that's when my mind changed. Is I was like, I'm just gonna love, like that's it. That's all I'm here to do. The punishment's been done. Right? That's now in my parents' ballpark. That's not mine anymore.
Yeah.
I like Corbin's getting punished enough. There's no need for me to punish him as well. And
Yeah, piling on probably wouldn't have helped.
no.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be so mad with him because we were at odds and there was no hiding it.
Well, and it created strife in our family. I mean, so we're extremely close, even more so now. But we were a close family. I mean, we tour, we travel, we do a lot of things together as a family. We like to be in each other's company. And this period was 6 months to a year of, we don't know what Corbin's doing. Garrison's pissed off. Elisa's up in college at Texas Christian. She's trying to, play ping pong between talking to the boys, talking to us. Then in our own marriage, it's you're dealing with the daily, there can be shame and guilt come in, right? And we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it with our friends. Of course, she knew I was talking about it with my tribe because that's my men's group. Well, then what about spouses? Do our close friends get to know that Corbin's struggling with vaping? And that took a long time for us to truly open up to people. But then that became part of the healing process. And I think, that's in this discussion is, so where's the reconciliation come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say another thing as well real quick was I remember then leaning on you guys a lot just struggling with what to do. Like, how do you attack that? How do I bring Corbin to the faith more so as a substitute because we're all looking for the same thing?
Yeah.
Watched a lot of guys. I watched a lot of friends find that in a lot of different places that wasn't the Lord. And I am just lucky that I found Junta when I did because that would have been me as well. I have no doubt. And so it was also really how do I bring that to the Lord or bring Corbin to the Lord. And there was one of y'all, I think it was you, Mike, actually was, God doesn't call us to save his sheep. You just have to feed them. And so I was like, I'm just gonna, I wouldn't call it evangelizing, but I was like, hey, Corbin, I'm gonna do a Bible study real quick.
It was an invitation.
If you just want to sit in, and slowly that came and came and came. But it was a slow and somewhat agonizing process on my end of just like ups and downs. Like we'd make progress and then we'd backtrack.
I remember that.
And that was a hard time.
Yeah, I remember you coming to me one time after one of our meetings, and you saying to me, "Hey, Corbin's coming around, man," and I really think that I'm trying to get him to come, and I don't think we ever did actually get him to come.
Got that first year.
That first year.
Nope.
But I also remember a time where it was just. Now I had found my faith again, and I was getting stronger in my faith, but I was run down. Yeah. I found a great solace in being in my alone time, and at that point I was alone for most of the time. And so I would wake up early despite being in season for lacrosse, and despite whatever was going on as well. School starts pretty early here, and it was actually taking a toll on me physically. My body was like, I couldn't, I was hurting physically because I was getting up so early to have that like alone time in the morning before I started my day. And so it was at the detriment to my physical form. And then with that, when you're carrying that burden, and I was sharing stuff with Tribe, but I was carrying a lot on my shoulders. And I also remember distinctly, maybe after, it was either the meeting in junior or senior, I think it was junior year still, and I drove you to your car because we ended up parking down at that Schooners.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am just so mad. Like, I have the shortest fuse. I'm blowing up on the smallest things. Like, I am just filled with just anger over everything. And there was, and that was still at a time where I felt like I was doing everything right. You know what I mean? And so, again, you just like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it was a slow process, that first bit.
And I think that's important for people to understand. I want to get to you next, Corbin, but I think it's important for people to understand is that saying yes to Jesus, it's not like the sun comes out. I mean, it does at first, but you have to remember, you just said yes to the future of you and your soul and everything else. And so we cannot forget that the second you do that, you become dangerous.
And the devil knows it.
And then the devil knows it. And when I say you're dangerous, you're dangerously good, because we can be dangerous in two different ways. I can be dangerously evil, or I can be dangerously good. And it depends on where I'm going to decide and which side I'm going to go to. And when we decide to become dangerously good, there's powers out there that don't like that, and they will continue to fight. So for those that are listening that may have a new faith or thinking about changing or whatever, I'm telling you, first of all, for those that have not, once you do, it is amazing. And no one can explain it to you what Jesus does inside of you. You have to feel that yourself. You can't, we can try all day to try to explain it, and we can't. And then when he does come in you, and you do have him in your heart, suddenly things just start changing, and the things that seemed so hard before become manageable, and you can overcome, and that is so important. But it's not overnight. That's the big thing I want to everybody understand. Okay, so Corbin, we're going back to you here. Tell us a little bit what decided you to turn from the ways in which you were living to begin looking for better ways. And then, I guess, where are you today?
What made me turn, truthfully, probably a little bit, primarily just Garrison. I mean, Garrison is an amazing guy. Just sets the perfect example in all ways. So it's easy. It's
not always perfect.
It's easy to watch Garrison and get the feelings of wanting to kind of do what he's doing. I know he was big in journaling at one point. And he kind of dragged me into that somehow, so it was like those little things that kind of, I think, really kind of started to change me. To be honest, I really couldn't tell you what fully changed me, because I kind of dropped all that crap before I started Junto fully. But I think what really changed me is I kind of finally started to feel convicted. I was stone cold all whenever this whole first thing was happening beforehand. Like, I had no conscience. There was no, I knew right from wrong. Everybody does. But I didn't have that, like, guilty feeling. I wasn't walking around with a guilty feeling, like, I didn't walk around coming into the house knowing that I have drugs on me. I'm like, nah, this isn't right. No, I didn't have that feeling. I was stone cold. I didn't care. I was just thinking about myself and what I wanted, you know what I mean? So I think eventually I finally started to feel convicted that, like, this really isn't it. Like, that's where I think I started to change, is kind of when I finally, and that really only happened when I started to come back to the faith a little bit and start reading, and it really happened fully when I joined Junto, which I think for me, I think it was really hard for me to come back to the faith too, because I had a foot in two worlds. I was smoking over here, but then I was also on FCA over here, and I think there's a lot of shame on my end on that, where it's like, yeah, I'm not worthy to do X, Y, or Z. And I think that's what really prohibited me from jumping back into the faith sooner.
So what was the first step? The first real step?
I think finally just, like, admitting to myself that, like, what I was doing was wrong. I think that's kind of like, it sounds so stupid, but truthfully, it's kind of like you walk around and you do these things so much that it doesn't even feel like it's anything wrong. But it kind of is, you know what I mean? I think it's kind of just, it was me realizing that what I was doing was wrong. I think that's what really kind of just made me eventually get to a point where I was like, yeah, let's try to get this behind us.
And mind you, we weren't peppering him. Remember? The contract. So we weren't constantly bringing it up, like, and it, the longer it went on, we went on a family cruise, and, he'd be walking around on the ship, and we'd see him, and we'd never really seen him vape before, and so, but then you're like, we're not on our property, we're out on a cruise ship, on the ocean, and, I'm like, it is what it is, and so I was like, Garrison, don't harass him, Elise, don't harass him, we're not going to say anything. it's part of the contract. And I think you have to, much like free will, when we choose Jesus, right? My relationship now, because I choose Jesus, is different than when I was a kid and saved at 7 years old, right? Because that's what I was brought up. And this really highlighted watching this growth was, I think for you, Corbin, the choice to change was his choice. We weren't forcing his parents.
Love it.
You know.
So you make that choice, and I guess what I want our listeners to hear is you make the choice, you understand that it's wrong.
Then what?
What's the first practical step that you took?
If you don't mind, I know I'm not Corbin, but I did have a numerous amount of conversations
And
at this
observation.
time period. Something that I noticed, and I think this is something that goes for a lot of people. We will talk. We may or may not get into it necessarily, but later on,
part two.
whenever I kind of come back to the friend group, you see this a lot if you start talking about faith, which took a long time. But something that I noticed was the urge to figure it out yourself and get yourself right before coming to the faith.
Yeah, that's
which
so
does
good.
not work.
That's a great
It
point.
doesn't. You cannot just. Yeah, I'm just gonna cold turkey. A nicotine addiction.
Yeah, and
It's not gonna happen.
Can I jump in really quick,
Yeah,
and I'll make
yeah.
it really short? And I remember when in the second year we started with the high school group of Junto, I remember you coming and you're like, I'm not sure where I'm at right now. Right? So Corbin came to the group saying, I'm not sure where I'm at
What
right
a perfect thing to say walking in the door. By the
now. Yeah,
way.
he did. He's like, look, I don't know where I'm at on my faith. I remember that very well. So sorry.
Yeah, and so I just think that it is worth stating that, and I think still maybe, and I'll let you kind of talk on that, but I think that was something that probably held you back, which that's tied to shame. That's what we talk about. And like you said, he had his foot in two different worlds, and so the shame is I need to get right before I come back to this faith so that I can do it right. And that's just not what God wants.
That's right.
When you come to the faith, your heart will change. Your heart posture changes. The way your mind works changes. We've seen it happen time and time again. That's how you quit. Something for good is you come to the faith and you let God deal with that, because at that point, that's the only guy that's going to save you.
Was that it for you, Corbin? How did it kind of go?
Really, I think it was great that I had Junto that year kind of coming out of all this, because it was consistent. So even if I wasn't there, I was there because it was at my house. I could not be there. There was no excuse not to go. Hey, Garrison said,
That wasn't by design.
It wasn't by design, but it was good.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
So it was like I was there whether I was there mentally and physically. Physically, I was always there. So I think really that's just really kind of what started to bring me back slowly was kind of just hearing things more. And I think that's where Junto also, it's so different from a church vibe and scene. And I think that's really what I needed. I needed a new perspective on the faith. And that's what Junto gave me. It gave me a raw, realistic, just everything.
Authentic.
Very authentic.
Practical.
Just, it was completely different from what I am at. From where I used to be at going to church, it was completely different when I walked into a Junto meeting. The conversations were deeper, the conversations were better. You open up conversations that normally you wouldn't have in any type of church group to an extent.
Yeah, that's that small group benefit for sure.
And so I really think, honestly, just having that small group, really, that Junto group is really kind of what fully kind of brought me back. Was just, it was consistent. It was every week. It was, whether I wanted to hear it or not, I was. And I think it's...
We did not pay him for that endorsement, by the way.
Yeah.
Actually, I took.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, $20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good investment.
Well, here's what I would say is that one of the things that I talk to my wife about all the time when it comes to the high school groups is, and Jim jokes around that Keith and Jim are the translators for Mike Sanders, because I can go down pretty deep rabbit holes sometimes because I love this stuff. But I also think that we don't respect you guys enough to really get into these really hard, difficult talks. And as you guys know, because you've known me for a long time now, I'm very much a science guy. I love science and I love Jesus. And so I look at it from bringing those two things together. And I think that's important. I think it's important to trust the intelligence and the hunger that's in high school boys. And I mean, I just want to get into some really heavy, deep stuff here. And so that's really cool, man. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, we definitely set the bar low for our youth sometimes.
Yeah,
It's part of the problem, and they can handle this stuff.
They can, and
they need to. I think.
Yeah.
The digital age, the phones, what our kids are exposed to now is totally different than when we were kids.
Absolutely.
You know, and so because of that, you got to have that open communication. And I'll tell you, if you want me, I can kind of wrap up how he bounced out of it from our perspective. Like I said, it wasn't us. It was him and with Garrison. And we didn't really know that until they applied for college. And Corbin was like, hey, you guys want to proof my college essay? And, you know, one of the college essay questions on the apps and all that is like, you know, who's somebody or something that influenced you to, you know, whatever. And when we read Corbin's essay, which was written amazingly, and it was about his twin brother pulling him kind of out of the depths of despair, it'll break your heart, right? I mean, in a good way, right? You're just like, holy cow, like you didn't get it right at the time. Well, then Garrison had introduced him to journaling, and I'm not a journaler. And then Corbin comes out, and I was like one day, and he was like, or we were talking about journaling or something. I remember I was sitting on the couch. He came out on the death chair, we call it. And because if you get in, you go to sleep. But anyway, Corbin, he was just like, yeah, so journaling or whatever. I was like, journal? What do you guys journal about? Like, and so I was asking, I'm like, how do you journal or whatever? And Corbin goes and gets his journal, and he was like, well, I'll just read you a little bit. And he said, you know, it's rough at the beginning. You're just kind of throwing thoughts on paper. And then it was like, this was like 2 weeks into it. And he read us a piece of his journal, and Allison and I looked at each other, and we were just like, okay, because Corbin is not like known for being the English, you know, like writer, doesn't really particularly care for that. I mean, just beautiful. You know, just this journaling is just beautiful to listen to. And then Garrison shared some, and I was like, oh, I think I'll try to look into journaling. And, you know, I started dabbling a little bit with it. It's just not my thing, but I started to doing it, but it was because Corbin gave it. Well, anyway, so then one day Garrison was playing guitar. So when he finally stopped vaping, and literally, I got to give it to you, he quit cold turkey. Just, you know, he had just had enough or whatever. And so I kind of was going by to talk to Garrison because he's playing his guitar in his room, his door's open, and Corbin's root is cracked, and he's sitting at his desk. And I happen to glance over enough that I see he's got his Bible out and his journal out. And what was the book? It wasn't Ruth. It's something in the Old Testament. Oh, it's one of the ones in the back, like where Malachi and all. I can't remember which book it was. Was it Amos? It was Amos.
Habakkuk.
Yeah, it was Amos or something like that. And so I noticed it's on his computer screen. I'm kind of like, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? And he was frustrated. He was like, man, I'm just trying to figure it out. Like that. And he's journaling. I'm like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, what do you, you got Amos up on your, and he was like, well, I'm just trying to figure out what this book is about. And I was like, why are you in the book of Amos? Like, I don't even think I've ever read the book of Amos. And he goes, well, you know, I don't know if you remember this. He was like, well, you know how you talk to people all the time and they're like, you know, all right, God, if you're real, just like, I'm going to flip open the Bible and like show me something, right? You know, or just like talk to me or whatever. And he flips open the Bible and it was like, whatever the verse was, it was like, you have sinned, you know, come back to me. Mm-hmm. Something along that line.
Yeah, it was something with that, or maybe even temptation.
Temptation or something like that. And I was just like, I think it was Amos, or maybe it was something else he flipped to, or even he was just like, I flipped open the Bible, and then that's what it says.
Yeah, it's good.
And so then I was like, oh, okay, all right. I'm going to let you just figure that out, right?
I'm going to quietly back out of the room.
Yeah, I did. I did. And I cracked the door, and I was just like, I go into Garrison's room, and I was like, journaling, you know, like what's going on? And then Garrison grabs this like felt bag and he holds it up, and I was like, because his door's still cracked and their doors are next to each other, so I'm like, what is that? And he was just like, it's all his vapes. We're sitting in this bag. And he said he gave them to me and said, don't let me find them. And he said, I won't let him find him.
Good job. You picked a good partner.
I did search for him, though. I can't lie. Quite a few times.
But I will tell you,
hidden right in plain view too.
Garrison was like, he won't ever find him. I promise you, like that. And I was just like, And that was, I think, that truly started that kind of healing process. It was his choice, right, to say, I'm done.
That's good.
Probably the financial
Good for
aspect probably hurt after 18 months, too. I mean, he's starting to run out of money, and I was like...
I added up the numbers, and we don't want to dive
You don't want to dive into that, but...
So, yeah, and if I can jump in again, this is another important thing that I want people to understand is that many people don't want to open up the Bible because it's so intimidating. And it is. And it's intimidating for a reason. It takes work, and that's what I want you guys to understand is it takes work to have a relationship with our Creator. And so when the more we're able to get into the Bible, the deeper we go into it, and I'm getting deep into it right now. I just absolutely love it. And the deeper you get in, the more there's just layers and more layers and more layers of depth in the Bible. And it is the experts will say that you can study the Bible as hard as you want to for the rest of your life, and you will always get a little bit deeper, which goes to show you that God is trying to reveal himself to us. And I think it's awesome. That's a great story.
I also just wanted to add on, I don't know if I fully answered one of the questions you asked me. I think it was also kind of where I'm at today. And I think it is good to throw it out there that, I mean, temptation's real. Surrounded by it in all aspects. I can't say I've been perfect from the time I've quit. And I probably won't ever be because it's a constant draw for me. Everywhere I look, it's a constant draw. But I think now at least I have something to fall back on that I didn't have before. And especially with me and Garrison, while we've been back here, actually, we've been meeting up with a friend of ours for a little Bible study here and there. And, it has been so good and so healing, too. I think me and him are on a much closer wavelength with certain things. And, yeah, it's been good to see that also, you're never the only one going through the same things as other people are, and that this really here recently really just made me realize that, too. But yeah, no, so it's really good.
Good.
That's awesome.
I have one more question.
Go for it.
All right. So I hope I'm not doing anything wrong here, but I think I'm right when I say that you just got a new tattoo.
I did just get a new tattoo, yes.
And what's it say?
It says seek, adapt, endure.
Okay. Seek, adapt, endure. And I think that's important because through all of this, you went out and you went to seek him. And in that process, you adapted into a better version of who you are. And it's important for everybody that's out there is that as long as you continue to seek and adapt and endure that for the rest of your life, you continue to change and evolve and become the man that God actually created you to be.
Amen.
Awesome, man.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I'll tell you, and just to see... as a parent, my wife and I talk about all the time. I mean, the growth in both of them, and especially now that they live together, to see the relationship now is different in an awesome way. The amount of wisdom that has come from these things helps them both make better decisions as young adults, now that they're on their own, right? They're off in college 12 hours away. They can do what they want, right? So it's refreshing to see that growth come from them. But without the trial, you don't have
That's right.
the great stuff that comes after it, right? Whether it's working out, losing weight, it comes with struggle, but you like the outcome. And ultimately, I think that's we're trying to get to that outcome, and we're all going to fall. We're going to fall short every day. And it's how you get back up, ask for forgiveness, and move on. And, and when you ask for forgiveness, it's gone. You've got to move on from that.
It's awesome.
I don't know if anything
Final thoughts, Garrison?
Yeah, something that I think God has taught me through all of this, especially being in college now, was patience was key, because I was so frustrated for so long because I'm a very logical person. I would say I'm very black and white. There really is no gray to me. There's really no bending the rules. Rules are rules. You follow rules. And and so for dealing with Corbin, I was like, I just can't understand. I was like, dude, it's illegal. It's not an option.
Right.
Like, I was like, this shouldn't be like a discussion. Like, and so that...
We literally had to have discussions with him. It was like, I get it that you're value, but you can't let that frustration come out. He signed a contract,
It's frustrating,
It's frustrating,
and then it's frustrating where I'm like, I can't see how you don't see the good that would come out of this if you would just, come. And so patience because that's not my role.
Yep.
Patience because that's where God deals with him. That's not my role. The other thing was just discipline, just being in that, I would it's probably a bad thing, but I tend to be a slave to my routine and get really deep into, you and I have talked about that.
You and I are very
times.
much related.
Yes. And so, but having a good routine is something that I value deeply, and I would say as well that it is worth saying that it's not easy. And I find that a lot of people make it seem like it is, and I would almost say if it feels easy to you, then you're doing it wrong.
That's it, man.
Because this faith thing, man, when you really are diving into it, there is so much of it that just stinks. I mean, and you're gonna you're gonna falter, and it's gonna be frustrating, and you're just and so many things are gonna come into play, and it's just not fair. A lot of the times you're just sitting there like, this is not fair. I am so, loyal, or I'm so whatever. And, I think also that's the humility to just be like, yeah, it really isn't fair, and it's not supposed to be, because, if it was, we'd all be hanging on crosses, right?
That's right.
And so that's not for us to decide. And then also just that alone time that you spend with God. I think especially being in college, it was a bit of a interesting start to college, going there, moving to Texas, where everybody at A&M is from small town Texas and already has friend groups. And so we spent a lot of time in the apartment, spent a lot of time alone, which was good. And just learning to be okay with silence and never missing an opportunity to shut your mouth and just, sit there in silence or talk to the Lord and do that very diligently and very intentionally has made all the difference for me.
That's great.
110%. So.
All right, we're going to give the final word to the big guy over here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I actually wrote it down as kind of like one of my final things, and we kind of talked about it earlier, but I remember one night, me and Garrison were coming home from something, and like, this is a conversation we're having as we were pulling it, and he was like, do you clean yourself before you get in the shower? I was like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, do you clean yourself before you get in a shower?
It's like wiping before you poop. It don't make sense.
No, I don't do that. He was like, then why are you trying to do that, with your faith? I think that's where I struggled so much, is because I was trying to almost become perfect before I came back to the faith in a way.
So good, man. So good.
But through this whole process, things have become clear more so once you get into the Word and once you start getting that faith back. That's truly when everything kind of started to change. That's when I got a conscience again. Now if I mess up, I have that almost guilty feeling on me walking around. I'm like, oh crap, you know what I mean? Whereas 2 years ago, I didn't care about anything. Nothing was on my conscience. I was stone cold. Whereas now, no, it weighs on me a lot. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the biggest thing that I've kind of taken out of this whole journey, is just,
Great.
we're not going to be perfect. We never will be, but
no,
That's awesome.
always fight to be.
Better than you were yesterday. That's
right.
Beautiful.
1% better every day.
Well, guys, thanks for being willing to share. I'm sure your message will impact a lot of people. It certainly impacted me. It's been pretty amazing to just be a part of your family in general, not just going through this. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And I have so much respect for how much the Lemur family loves each other. It's really inspirational.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it, and we love all you guys. Love the rest of your family. It's amazing to be around you.
Great job.
Thank y'all.
Thanks for tuning in, y'all.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right.
We will see you next time.
See you next time.
See ya. Peace.